Welcome, everybody. Warm welcome to all of you in this online Foundation Day program of IISER Mohali. We are delighted to have Professor Nitin Nitsure, who will be delivering this year's Foundation Day lecture of IISER Mohali. Before proceeding further, I would like to make a couple of requests. We would like to request all the Zoom meeting participants to kindly turn off your microphone and video inputs during the lecture. Question answering session will be at the end of the talk. Therefore, it will be very helpful if you kindly ask your questions during that session only. And please use the hand raise option in the Zoom platform for asking your questions. Those who are watching the YouTube link, you can post your questions in the YouTube chat box. Now, I would like to invite the Director, IISER Mohali, Professor J. Gaurishankar, to kindly introduce today's speaker. Professor Gaurishankar.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik. I am delighted that to invite all of you today to this Foundation Day event and the lecture to be delivered by Professor Nitin Nitsure. In particular, I wish to extend welcome to Professor Satyamurthy, the founder director, to whom the major credit of the founding of this illustrious institution lies. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce the Foundation Day lecturer, Professor Nitin Nitsure, who has been a researcher at the Tata Institute for Fundamental Research in Mumbai for close on 40 years, beginning in 1980. His primary attachment there has been with the School of Mathematics, and the area of his work has spanned several subtopics in mathematics. The particular contributions of Professor Nitsure have been in the theory of vector bundles, which have included the study of Hitchin pairs, logarithmic connections and D-modules, and related topological problems. However, Professor Nitsure has never let labels and boundaries define him, and he has collaborated with researchers in experimental physics and molecular biology, to name but a few. He is an enthusiastic teacher in the area of pure mathematics and has served on numerous bodies that aim to help people learn and be active in mathematics, such as the National Board for Higher Mathematics and the National Center for Mathematics. He was one of the key persons involved in the formulation of the graduate program at TIFR when it transitioned to a university. A number of faculty members at IISER Mohali have themselves interacted with Professor Nitsure when they were students or young researchers and have learned a great deal from him. Professor Nitsure was a recipient of the INSA Young Scientist Medal in 1987 and the prestigious prize from the Abdus Salam International Center for Theoretical Physics in Mathematics in 1997. In 2001, Professor Nitsure was elected to the fellowship of the Indian Academy of Sciences. Today's lecture by Professor Nitsure is titled, "What is Curvature and How to Mold It?" He promises that it will have little of mathematics and more of his other interests which, as I mentioned, have been wide-ranging. Incidentally, the Institute had hosted a talk yesterday by one of its faculty members in the Department of Mathematical Sciences, Dr. Vaibhav Vaish, who himself completed his PhD from the TIFR on an introduction to algebraic geometry. So this weekend has promised to be one of mathematics for the Institute. With that, I invite Professor Nitin to deliver his Foundation Day lecture.
Thank you, Professor Gauri Shankar, for your kind invitation and generous introduction. So let me try to share my screen. Okay. Okay, are we all set? Proceed. Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. So this talk is on what is curvature and how to mold it. I can still see in overlap my Zoom screen. Let me try to get rid of it. Do you see an overlap Zoom screen? Okay, let me get rid of
presentation mode.
Yeah, let me go into that and read. Oh no.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
Presentation, no, some presentation.
Okay, let me once again try it.
Maybe just close your Zoom screen. That's the or clear the view. Yeah. Now it seems okay.
Now it seems okay, but I have to restart this. Okay. Sorry for that.
Earlier it worked quite fine. So
earlier it worked fine. Yeah. So I don't know what changed. Okay.
Anyway, I think we just go ahead. It's okay. It's not very nice.
Yes, let's ignore this. So this talk is about what is curvature and how to mold it. And so I'll begin by explaining what is curvature before coming to how to mold it. And this part where I explain what is curvature is designed to be understandable to somebody who has not formally studied mathematics much beyond 12th standard. At least so I hope. Okay. So in geometry, the basic subject is Euclidean geometry. And that was originally developed as a model for the physical space which surrounds us. Basic concept in Euclidean geometry is that of a straight line, and here you see a straight line. Physically, it is a straight string. A plane curve is something a bit more complicated than a straight line, and here is a picture of a plane curve. And you see it goes like this. I hope it is visible. Even more complicated is a curve which is not a plane curve. So here I have shown a spiral, something like a spring, and you can see there is no plane in which it can fit. So it's not a plane curve. In everyday life, we see lots of examples of curves, and I'm going to talk about some examples as we go on. So how curved is a curve? What is hidden under this is the portion which says how curved is a curve. Okay. So we will confine ourselves to plane curves for simplicity. And so here's a curve. This spiral is a curve. So it's somewhat curved here, and it's more and more curved as you go in, and more and more curved as you go more and more in. So quantitative question makes sense. How curved is a curve? Now look at this picture. In this picture, this portion is almost straight, then it's curving, then again curving, and then going straight, and there's a sense to the curving First it's turning left and then it's turning right. So curvature seems to have a magnitude as well as a sense, left versus right or positive versus negative once we fix some conventions. So to make it precise, there's something called the curvature of a curve. I'm going to make one more attempt to get rid of this. I ask my audience to bear with me because otherwise you won't be able to see the titles. Doesn't work. No. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to try to read
Nitin,
it.
if you go to presentation mode, maybe.
Okay, let me go to presentation mode, whatever that means.
You can press F5 if that works. F5.
So it was there in the drop-down menu, but not the read.
Okay, let me stop share and then once again do everything. Where's the presentation thing?
Nitin, where you had pressed reload, in that there would be one which was presenting.
Where did it say reload? It didn't say reload anywhere here.
No, just above the reload, there is a presentation.
There's no reload anywhere here.
No. In that menu where you got reload.
No, but I didn't. Okay.
No, you had pressed that by mistake, maybe.
Okay, let's go here.
Yeah, in the same menu where you got the reload option.
Yeah, let me put this here. And now let me reload it.
This menu, you'll see presentation in the
here it says presentation. Okay.
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, didn't help.
Help because I moved that little thing down. All right, sorry about this. Let's go on. So we were talking about this road which was shaped like, which had this bend in it. And we want to quantify the notion of radius of curvature at a point of a curve. This was the thing which was not visible. Okay. So for this, I want you to imagine the road. This is the road, the curve as a road, and you're going in a certain way. So what do you do? As you drive, you keep turning the steering wheel. You turn it to the left here, and then you turn it to the right here, and then you keep it straight. Now, suppose you don't move the steering wheel. While you are negotiating this bend, you hold the steering wheel in a fixed position. Then you will describe a circle going left. And if you hold your steering wheel in whatever position it was while you are turning right, again, it will go into a circle. So at any point of the road, there's a circle of a certain radius given by the position of the steering wheel. It doesn't depend on how fast you're going. And that number, which has a dimension of length, is called the radius of curvature of the curve at that point. I'm going to illustrate this with a simple example so you'll see what I mean. So here's a road which looks like a parabola, y equal to x square, and the point in question is 0, 0. So suppose as you drive along it, as you arrive here, you hold your steering wheel in whatever position it is fixed. Then your car will leave the parabola and it will go around in a circle whose radius is 1/2. It's a simple exercise in calculus to check that, yes, these are indeed the numbers that you will get. So the parabola is most curved here. Everywhere else, curvature is less and less. As you go further, the radius of curvature goes increasing on either side. So this is what is meant by radius of curvature of a curve at a point. Now we want to define the curvature of a plane curve. So you choose a direction for your travel along the curve. Turning left, you can decide is positive. Turning right, you can decide is negative. You can do it the other way around, or you can change the direction of the curve. And so curvature will be defined as 1 upon this radius of curvature. So straight line, which means a circle of infinite radius, has curvature 0. And the unit of measurement for curvature is therefore 1 upon meter. Now, not all curves are in a plane. There are curves which are not plane. And this notion of curvature can be defined for those also. And something more needs to be defined to precisely say how twisted they are. That's called torsion. That measures how much your curve is changing its plane. But in this talk, I'm not going to need the notion of torsion. I'll only need plane curves. Now from curves, let us go one dimension up to the notion of surfaces. Suppose we have a surface in Euclidean space, 3 space. Here is a surface, it's a flat tabletop. Flat is one of the ideals that has curvature 0. So this is what it says, it's not curved. But here's another surface, the surface of this flower vase. And it has different curvature at different points. Even qualitatively, there's something quite different about the curvature here and the curvature here. Because try to put your hand on the vase. And if you try to put your hand here, your fingers will curl one way as you put your hand around it equatorially. And the same way, you have to curl your fingers the same way if you put your hand around it vertically. But if you put your hand on the neck, you'll have to bend your fingers backwards one way. While if you're holding it by the neck, you have to curl your fingers inwards. So your fingers have to curl in 2 different ways here. This is a qualitatively different feature, which will get defined as negative curvature, as you will see. So in the flower vase, the bottom is flat. This lower half has positive curvature and the neck has negative curvature. And the palm is a good test. Try to lay your palm along the surface and see which way it bends. If it bends opposite ways in 2 perpendicular directions, then it's negative curvature. So we want to know how curved it is. We want a measure of curvature just as we did it with radius of curvature, and 1 upon that, we want a measure of curvature for surfaces. And such a natural measure was invented by Gauss. So here is a picture of Gauss. And he did all kinds of fantastic, very diverse things. This is one of them. So this is Gauss's idea. He is going to take a surface and cut it. So in order to enjoy ourselves cutting it, let's take it to be a fruit. So here's a pear, and you want to cut it. You want to cut it with a knife. The blade of the knife is flat. And so the cut is the intersection of a flat plane with the fruit. So the edge of the cut is a plane curve. This is where plane curves come in. And this is why plane curves are so important to us in this lecture. So when you cut the fruit through some point here, you have a choice. You can hold the knife very slanted, or you can hold the knife perpendicular to the surface, which means it has to be perpendicular to the tangent plane to the fruit at that point, or other way of saying it is choose one of the 2 normal vectors at that point, and the knife has to contain the normal vector, whichever way. So in restaurants, sometimes they give you little wedges of lemon which are cut slanted. At home, we usually cut lemon perpendicularly. Okay. So, but even if you choose your cut to be a perpendicular cut through a point, there are many perpendicular cuts because you can rotate the plane of the knife while keeping it perpendicular to the fruit. And so the cuts are parameterized from 0 to 180. When you go to 180, the knife is back where it was, pointing the other way, but the plane comes back to the same. So you get a whole lot of curves, which are normal sections passing through P, and they have their own curvatures. So let's KCP denote the curvature of the curve C. And let us take the sign to be positive if the fruit is bending away from you, and negative it is bending towards you. So here a vertical cut will have negative curvature and a horizontal cut will have positive curvature. Now the various values you get of these curvatures have a certain maximum and a certain minimum when you count these signs. And the maximum value of the curvature is called K max, and the minimum is called K min. And so if you have sphere, it doesn't matter, the direction doesn't matter, so long as it's a normal cut, max and min are both 1 upon r. If you take a cylinder, then the max is going to be 1 upon r and min is going to be 0, because when you cut a cylinder along a plane which passes through its axis, the intersection is going to be a straight line, which has curvature 0. For a point, I'm not suggesting you cut human throats with knives, but there's the maximum curvature and minimum curvature are going to have two opposite signs. So Gauss's idea of defining curvature is to take the product. Gaussian curvature is the maximum times the minimum. So it's a very simple idea with profound consequences. And the unit of measurement of this is therefore 1 upon meter square. Everything has to have dimensions, length, mass, time, etc. Here it's only going to be length in geometry. There's another kind of curvature. It's called mean curvature. It is the sum of max and min. And the unit of measurement for that is 1 upon meter. So just to make sure the students have followed this concept, what's the Gaussian curvature of a football of radius 10 centimeter? I checked on the internet and 10 centimeter seems to be one of the accepted values for radius of a football in international competitions. Okay, so what's its Gaussian curvature? And the answer is 100 upon meter square. In this example, what is going to be the curvature? We already talked about it. It's going to be a certain positive quantity here, negative quantity here, 0 here, etc., etc. Okay. So with this definition of curvature, Gauss proved a certain theorem, which he called as his remarkable theorem. And the theorem was that this curvature is intrinsic to the surface. It only depends on distances measured along the surface with a measuring tape lying on the surface, and not how the surface sits in the 3 space. Well, the mean curvature does not share this remarkable property. So remarkable theorem is only about this. So as an example, if you take a piece of paper and roll it up without stretching, bend it, then the intrinsic distances along it are not altered. An ant has to walk the same distance, whether the paper is flat or bent. And the Gaussian curvature, therefore, which was 0 to begin with for the flat paper, remains 0 for the rolled up paper. Now, this Gaussian curvature has great consequences. I'm going to tell you one very elementary consequence. And that has to do with the relation between the circumference and radius of a circle. You know, in Euclidean geometry, regardless of what's the radius of a circle, if you measure the radius along the flat plane, your measuring tape lies in your flat plane, and you measure with a tape the circumference, then the circumference is 2 pi times the radius, never more, never less. But on a curved surface, it is different. So if you imagine yourselves on the earth, center of your circle is the North Pole, and with a tape you measure your radius along the surface of the earth, measure out a circle which is really the equator. Then the distance from pole to equator, whatever it is, the equator is just 4 times that and not 2 pi times that. It has changed. So you can see that the circumference is less than 2 pi times the radius on something which is positively curved. On something negatively curved, it will be the other way around. But precisely by how much? So this is the theorem of Bertrand and Puiseux. They found out that if C of r denotes the circumference of a tiny circle of radius r around a point on the surface, then this CR is 2 pi r plus a correction factor, and that correction factor is minus pi by 3 times the Gaussian curvature times r cube, plus higher order terms in R, so terms like R4, R5, etc., etc. So this formula becomes more and more precise as you make R smaller and smaller. You can turn this formula around And then if you take this to the other side, divide by this and take limit after dividing by R cube, the higher order terms R4, etc., will give 0 as limit, and you will get the Gaussian curvature as this correction in the circumference divided by R cube, limit as R tends to 0 with this numerical factor. So you can see from this formula that curvature is a higher order phenomenon. The corrections, this correction comes only at the third order and more. So it's a subtle effect. So now let me report a little piece of work I did last year. One may think that in this classical subject, there can be nothing new. But then here's a surprising thing. So do the following experiment. Suppose there's a planet, for example, our own dear Earth, and on that you're going to drive your car. That gives a curve. People also drive cars on other things, like NASA drives their buggy on Mars. Now, suppose that you hold the steering wheel fixed in the straight position, then the path that the car traces out is called a geodesic. It is the shortest path between two nearby points. Rajaram Nityananda, who is a very famous physicist and whose name even the non-physicists among you must have heard, asked me a very interesting question last year. He said, you are on some planet, on some surface, start at an arbitrary point P0 and go along a geodesic for S meters and arrive at a new point P1. Let me exploit this little unwanted rectangle here to show what he meant. Start here P0 and go to P1. Then he said, turn 90 degrees to the left. So this is the turn. And go along the geodesic for S meters. So you come here. That's the point P2. Then he said, repeat. So again, turn left and go for distance S meters and come to a new point. That's the point P3. Then he said, repeat again and arrive at a point P4. So here I am back. Now he said, if S is flat, of course you are back. You get a square. No wonder, simple experiment. But otherwise, the quadrilateral may not close. If it's a curved surface, you may not come back where you started. His question was, how much is the gap? By how much? And so here's a precise mathematical question, very elementary one. And I could solve it, and let me show you my solution with pictures. So here's the flat case, curvature 0, travel and you come back. I found that in the negative curvature case, when you finish this travel, you are still away from P0 by an amount which I found is curvature upon root 2 times S cube. Again, that S cube is coming in just as in Bertrand and Poiseuille's theorem. So the gap has the magnitude Gaussian curvature upon root 2 times S cube. In the positive curvature case, again, you won't come back where you started, but you'll overshoot. And the amount, the distance between your starting point and where you ended, is again the Gaussian curvature upon square root of 2 times S cube. The interesting point, another interesting point, totally unexpected to me and then to anybody who heard my theorem, was the angle is always 45 degrees. This angle is always 45 degrees to the original direction. So in the case of positive curvature, you end up at 45 degrees to the right from where you started. And in the negative curvature, 45 degrees to the right with a negative sign, which means 135 degrees to the left. And that's where you'll always end up. So this is my theorem. So here I have stated the theorem somewhat more precisely. The gap has this magnitude up to third order terms. And the point P4 is in the direction of minus 45 degrees when curvature is positive and plus 45 degrees when the curvature is negative. In fact, we can turn this around just as we turn the Bertrand-Poiseuille formula around and define K manifestly in intrinsic manner in terms of these gaps. I found that in fact, I can even recover the Riemann curvature tensor with identically defined quadrilateral gaps in case of higher dimensions. And so here's my paper for the mathematicians who may want to know more. Now I'm coming to the end of my differential geometry part of the talk, and let me point out that I never once took a derivative. Okay, so but for the serious students among you who want to learn more differential geometry, I have written this little study guide of a few lines. So if you want to learn basic differential geometry, whether you want to do mathematics, physics, or engineering with it, how to go on. First step is your usual undergraduate courses in linear algebra and in calculus of one and many variables, which you have at IISER Mohali. And then you are ready to read basic textbooks. And here's a book which is my favorite. It's called Geometry of Physics. Here's the reference. And of course, if you are an IISER Mohali student, you will have the good fortune of taking formal courses in differential geometry as elective courses at some appropriate stage. Okay, so now I am going to go on to physical things. This is about going from flat sheets of material to curved surfaces. And this is my joint work with Shankar Ghosh of TIFR. This is Shankar. And his student Harsh Jai. This is Harsh. So one day Shankar told me the following. He said there are sheets of plastic called Shrinky Dink. This is a commercial name. You can see YouTube videos about Shrinky Dink, children playing with Shrinky Dink, etc. Its property is this plastic shrinks and remains shrunken when you heat it. Now, Shankar's idea was, suppose you draw some black design on the sheet and heat the sheet by radiation. Then the blackened part will selectively heat and shrink, and the rest of the sheet will not shrink, so the sheet will deform. His question was, can we obtain a curved surface, any desired curved surface, with a suitable black design? And so people had been playing with Shrinky Dink for a very long time, but for the first time, Shankar asked this question a year and a half ago. Very interesting, perhaps 2 years ago. So we were walking along the seashore when he asked me this question, and I immediately started offering solutions. I suggested various neat and elegant mathematical solutions. It is one of the things with us mathematicians to offer neat and elegant solutions. And while they kind of half worked, they ran into physical problems. They did not give exactly what one wanted, and sometimes gave very grotesquely different things. And the problems were of this kind. The black parts do not heat uniformly. The edges get cold. Middle part gets overheated and soft, can sometimes tear. Stresses develop, so unwanted deformations result, and so on. A lot of this was nonlinear behavior. So one of the cornerstones of mathematics is to try to understand everything in terms of linear behavior. Derivative approximates a function as a linear function, and cohomology approximates a whole space by a vector space, and so on and so on. And non-linear things are very challenging always for a good mathematical treatment. And we wanted robust methods. Mathematics is very precise, but physical things are never that exact. And so suddenly a rational number can become irrational in mathematics, but it should physically, actually nothing had changed. It was very close to it. So things should not be so affected by small perturbations. They should be robust. So I had to go on readjusting the mathematical solutions, and I even found there were some gaps in my differential geometry understanding. And Shankar had to be fully involved in the mathematical ideas so that they can be implemented. Finally, we made 3 robust methods, which I have christened as tailoring method, metric molding method, and distance molding method. And the paper is now published. Here is the paper. And so I'm going to give in the rest of my talk a quick view of this. And for more details, especially more scientific details with all kinds of temperatures and graphs and elasticity and whatnot, you are referred to this. And also precise mathematical formulation of what are the limits of our methods appears here. Okay, so my inspiration for first method was tailoring. As you know, cloth is flat, but human bodies are gloriously curved. So how are clothes made? And the answer is this. If you look at any tailoring pattern, they draw wedges which are cut from the cloth. They are excised, and the resulting edges are sewn together. This is how you produce curves. So tailoring inspired our first method for molding plastic. So we draw a tailoring-like pattern on a plastic sheet, and we paint the wedges or eye-shaped regions which are otherwise cut out. We paint them black. And then we heat the sheet by radiation, which contacts them. So this produces new shapes. So I'm going to show you examples of this without going into more theoretical explanation. And for that, I have chosen surfaces of revolution. A surface of revolution is something which has an axis, and the whole surface can be rotated around it, remaining within itself. So this is the kind of surface which a potter makes on his wheel. So here's a basic picture. Suppose I want to make this surface, which I have drawn here. Then we'll begin by taking this disk. And on this disk, I'll paint a wedge which is black. Except that instead of painting a single wedge, I'll distribute this black thing along in a number of black wedges so that it doesn't happen that all things happen in rather discontinuous steps. It's a more uniformly spread out curvature. And so because this black thing is going to contract for a given radius measured along the sheet, the circumference is going to change differently as you go out, as in Bertrand-Poiseuille theorem. And so when the appropriate amount of shrinking happens in circumference appropriately far away, this thing will get converted into this thing. There's more to it, of course. How do I ensure it first goes down, then comes up, etc., instead of going down again, etc. All this explained in our paper. I'll make brief comments later. So this is the idea. So I'm going to show you samples of what this idea can produce. This is the theory of the surface of revolution, but here are some examples. So we wanted to make this hemisphere, and actually what came out was this. This is after molding. Before molding, it was a flat disk on which certain black things were painted. Here we want to make something which first goes in and then goes out. And this is what we produced. Okay, let me give away the secret. The way you make something either go inwards or outwards is to put the black ink on selected side of the plastic sheet. So then that side heats more, and just as a bimetallic strip bends, the sheet bends in the direction on which the black is painted. That's how you manage to selectively go inwards or outwards. Now, that's what I'm showing here, that if from this point onwards you go up, you will go get this. If from this point you go downwards, you will get this. And both are possible. You see these beautiful things where the thing has come in. That was unintended, because this edge of the black painted piece also contacts inwards. If you want to avoid that, you'll have to make it somewhat larger on the outside. Now about some surfaces which are not surfaces of revolution. Here are some. Here is something negatively covered, a saddle shape. This is not the surface of revolution. It's rather asymmetric. You can see it from its shadow. So all such things can be made. They can be made at many different scales. So let me come to my second method. For that, I have to explain a little bit of mathematics. It's called the spectral theorem. So you know, on a flat sheet, you can take Cartesian coordinates, and a small displacement has a length given by the Pythagorean formula. But if you choose curvilinear coordinates on a curved surface, then the formula for distance is not this neat Pythagorean formula. They are not all mutually perpendicular and unit coordinates everywhere. They are curvilinear coordinates. And so the formula looks like this, where this E, F, G depend on where you are. They are functions. The spectral theorem says that if I take any point on the curved surface, okay, if I take any point of the plane with Cartesian coordinates x, y, then there are two mutually perpendicular directions u and v and two numbers lambda and mu. So is that the following happens. The metric changes into this new one if you shrink in the direction of u by a factor lambda or stretch in the direction of mu by a factor lambda. And in the other direction v, you stretch it by the factor mu. So everywhere there will be two mutually perpendicular directions and you shrink or elongate each one by a different factor. If you do that, this metric will get converted into this metric. This is what the spectral theorem says. And so inspired by the spectral theorem, here's the metric molding method. We want to convert this into this. This is then the challenge of molding a desired intrinsic metric. How do you do that? So using the spectral theorem, you find out these directions u, v, and the factors lambda and mu. And then you so choose a black design, changing from point to point, so that in the direction u, the thing stretches by factor lambda, and in the direction v, it stretches by mu. But that is possible only if these are contractions, if lambda is less than 1 and mu is less than 1, because you remember that this shrinking only shrinks, it doesn't expand. But the answer is very simple. Yeah. But okay, so again, to put the problem, if both these were greater than 1 or any one of them was greater than 1, then we are going to need an expansion in one of the directions. How are we going to do it? And the solution is what I call C trick, C for contraction. The idea is begin with a much larger plastic sheet. If you want to fashion a much smaller curved surface, then of course you have to contract everywhere. There's no need for expanding anywhere. Mathematically, it means instead of whatever your original Cartesian coordinates or curvilinear coordinates, replace them by a huge multiple. Then you'll only have to contract. Okay, so this is the idea. So now how do you implement it? The implementation is by taking the rectangular flat sheet, dividing it into little squares, and in each of those little lattice squares, we assume that this E, F, G are constant, and then to have an appropriate design in that square, which will deform that square into the desired new shape. So here's how this looks. Suppose I had some sheet of plastic and I put a black band like this and a black band like this. Then this black band will contract, this black band will contract, and the whole sheet will deform. This is the idea. And so we make this kind of a design. This is the basic pattern. This induces a huge contraction along this axis and a smaller contraction along this axis. And the boundaries of each of these squares are kept black. That's because then the plastic melts and softens, and so each of them is going to be slightly different from each other, and this molten boundaries allows them to mutually adjust. So I'm going to show you samples, very enlarged samples of what happens. I want to make this, and so this is the kind of thing which results. I want to make this saddle, this is the kind of thing that results. To get something this smooth, I'll have to divide it into a very large number of pixels. And then the picture would not have been clear at all about what is happening. Okay, so imagine this is something which is happening in a very tiny area, and then this can achieve for you the desired intrinsic metric. Now here is a problem. Yes, you can get a surface with desired intrinsic metric, and therefore by Gauss's theorem design intrinsic curvature. But what if you wanted a particular shape in your three-dimensional space? You see? So metric molding induces the desired intrinsic metric, but it does not induce a unique embedding. Of course, nothing is unique because you can always move it around or rotate it, but for that, you want something unique. And to achieve that, I have this third method, which we call distance molding. And the idea is very simple. We draw a triangular grid on the flat sheet. And the black coloring contracts each edge of the triangular grid to a desired new length. We can only contract, remember, but the C trick ensures that contractions are going to be enough. And so I'm going to show you the basic triangular trial pattern, which will give these contractions. It's a complicated pattern because we have to basically take care of a lot of physical variables and uncertainties and produce a robust design. All that is explained in the paper. So the basic triangle looks like this. The painted part looks like this. These painted parts link up with the nearby painted parts of nearby triangles. And so that the unpainted parts look like little hexagonal islands within these painted parts. And you can see their shapes are subtly changing. This picture here is such that if you heat it and the yellowed part contracts, then this whole thing will end up into a convex surface like this. So this is my third method. This finishes the explanation of my molding work with my collaborators Shankar and Harsh. And now I want to make some, okay, I should show some examples of this, of distance molding. This is American football made like this. This is a saddle. So basically all those things we can make and get them right in the three-dimensional space. But now I want to make some remarks about, born out of my experience of collaborating with scientists. I am making these remarks in the humble spirit that each person is different. What works for me may not work for others. You may find better methods, and different situations require different methodology, but I just want to share my experience. So for me, it was a very interesting experience interacting with physicists, engineers, or biologists. And this is what was typical for me. Usually it began, so I had people working in these things as friends. So first of all, in my method, you need lots of friends in different disciplines. TIFR canteen, an ideal place for carrying out this activity. Now, it begins with a non-mathematician friend asking a mathematical question. Sometimes it is too precise, sometimes it is totally vague, but expecting a precise answer. And this typically happens over lunch or tea. But then in my experience, instead of just answering the question, it is important for the mathematician to understand something of the physical background of the problem that prompted the question. And for this, we have to understand the other subject somewhat. It is exceedingly tough for a mathematician to understand anything else in my experience. Of course, my colleagues may understand things better in various directions, but I find it a struggle. And then this might lead to altering the mathematical question. And then the real question emerges, which one must answer. So one should not just rush into treating the original question as a mathematical question and then giving a clear, rigorous answer to it. You have to perhaps modify the question. In any case, you have to understand why the answer is wanted. So what can be approximated and what can be left out. And historically, though I have not had the good fortune of taking part in something as big, mathematical modeling of physical systems has led to important new mathematics. Even calculus itself, Fourier analysis, more recently mirror symmetry, has born out of such interactions. And at a more practical day-to-day level, where you have a lot of mathematics applied to science and engineering, so the path is modeling, simulation, optimization, control, and this is the journey that we have to make together with our collaborators in applied science and engineering. But the starting point always is to have interest and curiosity and to spend time together. I cannot emphasize this enough. Spend time in an unstructured informal interaction with people from other specializations And the other important thing is to be prepared to move out of our respective zones of comfort. Okay, so this is what is my experience. And I must say that an institution such as IISER Mohali is ideally suited for such interactions. So that brings me to the end of my lecture. Thank you for your kind attention.
Okay, so thanks, Nitin, for a very nice talk and some very thought-provoking remarks at the end. I will begin by asking people who are on Zoom, if they want to ask a question, they can raise their hand and then unmute themselves and ask the question as I call the name. Yeah. So, do I see anyone who has raised a hand? If not, I will then move on to questions which are being asked over YouTube. Oh, so Mani Luthra, so Punnanand, I suppose, has a question. Yeah, Punnanand, go ahead, please.
Professor Nitture, that was a very, very engaging, very interesting talk. My question is not directly related to the talk. My daughter is becoming very interested in differential geometry as it applies to robotics. So I was wondering whether she could contact you and benefit from this extremely open attitude that you have of people stepping outside the comfort zone.
Yes. Yes, please, you can pass on my email address to her.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments from the Zoom participants? Otherwise, I will go on to the questions from WhatsApp. Nikhil Tanwar asks, on slide 15, the calculations are done for constant curvature. Is that correct? So maybe Nitin, you have to check your slide 15.
Oh, well, I have to go back to the slide, but yes, the sphere was calculated for constant curvature also.
Yeah, I think, yeah, perhaps he's talking about the formula of Bernard and, yeah.
No.
That doesn't require, I don't think that requires constant curvature. No, I think he's talking about the answer to the Professor Nityanand's question.
No, there is no constant curvature
there. Yeah, it's not necessary because everything is in the limit of very small lengths. So I don't think there is.
No.
Right. Ramanujan Srihari asks on the geodesic gap discussion, instead of stopping at P4, if we continue making 90-degree turns and length S and obtain points on the surface, can we decide based on S whether the polygon always closes?
No, the polygon does not always close for any arbitrary value of S. And for certain values of S on a certain surface, it will.
Right. So I suppose his question is regarding travel on Martian surface. So if you keep going round and round, whether the Mars rover will return to its original place or not.
Because a rover has a finite size, the physical questions are always very different from mathematical questions. This is the kind of question where rational and irrational make all the difference.
All the difference. Yeah. Harsh Rana has a question. Making changes on surfaces by deforming the small local plane surfaces, is this done by computer modeling while you carry out your work? So
yes.
Is the painting done by computer, I suppose is the question.
Yes, it's fully automated. And so we have an algorithm, computer program, which chooses the black and white pattern. And so the surface is photographed, imaged, and then a function, from that one has software which then converts it into the pattern required. You can then, even if you want to fully automate, you can feed that to your printer. Your ordinary office printer is what prints the shrink-ed ink sheet if it's of that size. But then we have to put it in an oven, and which has a turntable and an infrared lamp above it, and etc. Somewhere you have to use your hands.
Well, I suppose 3D printing may use this technology.
That's a completely different idea. 3D printing is a different idea of how to
No, no, what I mean is something similar. You could make a printer which prints the surface.
Oh yeah, who knows?
Okay. Himanshu Tiwari has a question regarding the formula for geodesic gaps. How did you come up with such a formula? Can you provide some intuition or logical deduction?
So I have given you the link to my archive paper, and there you can read the proof. And the idea was this. I realized that the question has to be improved before it can be answered, basically. And so one has to remove all kinds of superfluous things and only keep a connection on a manifold. Sorry, the question is a bit technical answer. So just a connection on a manifold. And then the main technical tool is a Taylor expansion. And so you work over an Artin local ring in which a higher power of S is
0
to 0. And then carry out a calculation in this.
So you do it with formal power series. That's the point.
Yes, that's it. That's it. But all the time I truncated them because I knew what's going to happen.
Okay, so there's a comment from Patta, Yogendran, Professor Yogendran.
Yes, hi, Patta.
Thanks, Nitin. Triangulation method, are the engineering deficit angles somehow involved for each triangle by the yellow shaded regions?
I don't know this word engineering deficit angle, but yes, indeed the angle all round a path will no more add to 360 when you do all this. So deficit or excess, whatever is taken care of through this method.
Okay. So I think I could not see any more questions. Let me see. Yeah, so I don't know if this is a question. Samir Biswas is interested in making 3D solid shapes also. So I don't know how much you can do with that.
Yeah, we have not thought of the question of making 3D solid shapes. I remember playing with plasticine when I was a kid, but nothing mathematical.
So I have a small question here. I mean, is there some analogous thing which you people have worked with biologists? So is there something analogous where you work with biological molecules instead of plastic sheets?
You know, we have, okay, so very good question. Let me point out this. One may ask that, why do you have this method in which there's no cutting and gluing? See, I should have pointed out that this whole method had no cutting and gluing. And so this method, for this, we had very much in mind growing biological membranes. You know, when cells proliferate and form a membrane, there's also selective necrosis. And then finally, organs result with different shapes. And in all this, it's an idea at the back of our mind that something like this will apply to growing two-dimensional sheets of living cells. But we have not done anything concrete in that direction.
So I think Sati has a question. Yeah, Professor Satyamurthy, please go ahead.
Yeah, see, I was resisting the temptation to ask the question from the strategy that you had thought of. Can you interpret as to how the flowers have five-fold or a six-fold symmetry? Now, as I said, I didn't want to ask this question, but since you said you are looking at the biological applications, I wonder if you could respond to this question.
That's a very nice, interesting question. And I had those flowers in the vase there. And yeah, I have looked at flowers with these eyes. But flowers are really more complicated. There's something inside which counts the petals, perhaps. The amount of information that living things carry for their growth It's a vast DNA data bank of information. So I don't know whether something as simplistic as what I'm talking about will apply to actual living things of that complication. But surely some parts of the petal grow faster and some parts grow slower, and that does give them shape, bit like the differential geometry described here.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was asking these questions, why a large number of flowers prefer a 5-fold symmetry and number of them then a 4 and a 6-fold. Okay, maybe I'll follow it up with a question on the email to you and then we'll discuss it. Thank you. I enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Purnanand had one more question.
Yeah, Professor Nitsure,
Yes.
one of the questions that was asked about what would happen if you kept making left turns on the surface of a planet, and what you said about the thing leaving a gap and sometimes overshooting.
Yes.
And if you just continued to do that, there was a question about whether the thing would eventually close. That reminded me of this toy that children have. I think it's called Spirograph.
Yeah. Yes.
Where if you keep
Yes.
taking it round and round and round with
Correct,
that
correct.
with the gears meshing,
Yes.
eventually the thing closes.
Correct.
So is it possible to create a spirograph like a toy that would work on the surface of a football, for instance, where you would have the outer gear on a curved surface, and the inner gear could be curved or even flat,
I see.
and going round and round and round and round. And what kind of shapes would then get made, and would they close?
Interesting question. I
Interesting.
mean, I don't know. I can only make one small comment on this. In that toy spirograph, the various wheels have gears, which are integers.
Yes.
And that's why the ratio
closes.
And that's why it closes. It's rational numbers come in through counting of the gears.
Okay.
So now about making this kind of a toy, well, one has to imagine physically how to draw, who knows, perhaps there's a toy which will draw pictures on football, and maybe footballs with such pictures will become fashion in the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, sir. Thank you. So I see no more questions. With that, then I hand over to our Dean Research, Professor Kaushik.
So I can stop sharing my screen, right? I already stopped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much once again, Professor Nitsure, for a wonderful talk. And thank you, Professor Kapil, for coordinating the question answer session and the introduction session. Now, as per the tradition, the annual report of IISER Mohali is inaugurated in this Foundation Day program. Therefore, we take this opportunity to inaugurate the annual report of IISER Mohali for the year 2019-2020. And can I request Vijay to kindly share that screen? Yes, so here we are showing the front cover and back cover of our annual report for the year 2019-2020, and the birds and flowers which you are seeing here, they are all from IISER Mohali ecosystem, and photographs are taken by Vijay Anand and Anshuman Rai Chaudhuri. So we thought that we'll collect all these pictures and put them on the cover of the annual report. Now, I'd like to request our director, Professor Gauri Shankar, to kindly announce the inauguration of the annual report.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik. So it gives me great pleasure to inaugurate the annual report and provide, in a regular setting, we would have opened ribbons to hand over copies to the distinguished members in the audience. So that is being done virtually in today's Foundation Day program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now also the Best Library User Award of ISER Mohali is also declared on this day. And for this, I would like to request the convener of the Institute Library Committee, Dr. Arijit Dey, to make the announcement. And I understand Dr. Vishakhi, our librarian, could not join today's meeting. So in her absence, I'd like to request Arijit to kindly announce the Best Library User Award of ISER Mohali for this year.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm happy to announce the name. And this year's awardee is Mr. James White from MS19 batch. So he's requested to collect the award as well as the certificate when he's back to campus. Thank you. Can you show the certificate?
Yes, it is on screen right now.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arijit. Now, before we conclude, once again, we would like to express our sincere thanks and gratitude to Professor Nitin Mitsure for accepting our invitation and to deliver the online Foundation Day lecture of ISER Mohali. I would also like to thank Dr. Vijay Anand, Dr. N.G. Prasad, Dr. Amit Kuloshrestha, and Dr. Vaibhav Vyas for their tremendous effort toward arranging this online program. And once again, thanks to Professor Kapil for coordinating the interaction session. Our sincere thanks to our registrar, Professor Jagdeep Singh, and director, Professor Gauri Shankar, for all their support in the process. And thank you all for your participation. With this, we would conclude our session. Thank you again.